Good evening, everybody. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, California, and welcome to The Forum. Our ongoing conversation series has moved online. We've been having some great conversations. Each year, Grace Cathedral chooses a theme for reflection, and in 2021, our theme is the Year of Healing. As we near the second year of COVID-19, I just can't believe we're going to have two COVID Easters. The importance of community has never been greater. We're also celebrating the Chinese New Year this week, the Year of the Ox, on Friday. And I am especially pleased to welcome Betty Louie as my guest this evening. Betty is a first-generation Chinese-American, a retired businesswoman, philanthropist, and community leader. She has been the driving force in revitalizing San Francisco's Chinatown, something all neighborhoods are needing right now. Betty, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Malcolm. Glad to be here.
Last night I was out fixing the car, like the old style with the hood up and everything. And my neighbor, Michael Lee, Dr. Lee, Al Lee's son came by and he said, oh, be sure to say hi to Betty for me.
Oh, yes. I loved his dad.
Yeah, what a great family. I mean,
yes.
we know all the boys, and Dr. Lee was a wonderful neighbor for us for so many years. And we were the ones who called the ambulance when he fell the last time and had to be hospitalized. But I loved hearing his stories about just like growing up as part of the Chinese community in San Francisco. He would talk about the basketball leagues and different ways people would get together for various celebrations. And he was so faithful in going downtown to the Chinatown, to the YMCA there every day to meet with people and be with them.
Yeah, he, if you ever go into his office, he was like a history book. Anytime he went in, if I even pointed to a picture on the wall, he'd say, there's where your father was. We were both on the basketball or the swim team or whatever it was. And then he'd go on to, a long story about what they used to do and how much fun they had. Yeah,
he was the best neighbor. And you're so right. I mean, just someone who's just so full of stories. I just wish we'd lived next to him for 30 years because he never told the same story twice. And it was wonderful having him as a friend.
Yes. And he was a great tennis player.
I got the sense that he was a good athlete. I don't even know how you can make that judgment on somebody who's 90 years old, but that's what I sensed.
I had a dream about him once and I got really scared because it was a horrible dream. And then I drove into the garage where we park in Chinatown. And some of the fellows came up to me and said, Dr. Lee just got into a terrible accident. And car accident, his car did a 360 on Bush Street coming to work. Wow. And he was out of the hospital and back having lunch with his friends within a week.
Yeah, I think he broke some bone and was just like, I thought that's the end. And he was able to get better.
Yeah, and he bought a new car right after that. He was like 90 years old when he did that.
Can't drive around the old broken up car.
Exactly.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about just like kind of your family's connection to San Francisco. Like how did your family get here and what was their story?
Well, my grandfather came here, I would say probably in the 1900s, early 1900s, because I know he, went back and forth to China. I believe he was a merchant from the very beginning with several other people. And he brought my father back in, I'd say maybe 1930-ish. And they both spent some time at Angel Island.
Oh, right.
Yeah, right. I think like 4 or 5 months there before they were allowed to come into the city. And so my dad grew up in Chinatown.
We had a program where we had a musical group that was setting some of the poems that were carved into the detention facilities, basically. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Angel Island is kind of like the Ellis Island of the West. But the musical group is putting those to music. What did he say about what that was like being there on Angel Island?
I believe when he was probably in his 80s. I took him back to Angel Island because the barracks had been restored somewhat.
Yeah.
And I said, do you remember anything? And he said, not necessarily the content, but he remembered the writing on the walls. And he said, I was too young to remember much.
Yeah.
So I consider that maybe a good thing. You know, as a child, you have a little bit more innocence, and you're able to have fun, even though the circumstances are not the best.
Yeah, that's so true. I used to visit this lady she was an elementary age student during the 1906 earthquake, and she loved the earthquake. Like the earthquake camping in Golden Gate Park. I mean, I'm sure her parents and everybody was just worried sick, but I mean, she had such fond memories just in the way that you describe of just, being a child, you notice different things, you experience things in a different kind of way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what did he do once he got off Angel Island? Like, how did he settle in? How did he kind of find his way and find his place?
You know, what I think happened, and it's probably the story of many immigrant families, is my dad went to live with his father. You know, there were no women really, and they probably lived in one of these single room occupancy buildings in Chinatown. I know for sure that my dad was dirt poor. He told me he never really, he had shoes until they had holes into it. He was so skinny because he had no food to eat. And he remembered that the Y was a place where he could go and have friends and meet and kind of forget that there was that outside world. But he also had Chinese school. So he being one of the students, he actually learned how to read and write Chinese, unlike me, who definitely went to Chinese school not to learn Chinese.
Yeah, it's funny. Different. My wife's Hawaiian. Well, she's Hawaiian Chinese actually, but grew up in a time it was illegal to teach Hawaiian to students in schools for many, many years. It was kind of part of colonialism, but we have kids now that are growing up in full Hawaiian immersion schools, and it is just a really different experience of the culture for sure.
Yes, yeah. I just talked to a gal the other day, and I said, "What was your Chinese school experience like?" And she said, "Didn't learn a thing." And I look back and I think about it. Everybody I know of my generation who's been to Chinese school never learned anything.
Well, maybe you learned the important things. Maybe the important thing was those friendships and not, getting
Exactly.
your character stroke right.
Yeah, it was just 2 hours a day, every day after school. We all knew that. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, like your dad was in poverty so much when he was young. What happened next for him?
Well, I think he was a very good student. Obviously, he went to local schools. If he were in Chinatown, I'd assume that he was going to what was known as Gordon Lau. Today, there was school on Clay Street. I know that he went to it was Commerce High. I don't know if that was the Lowell of its time, and I'm not sure where he went to junior high school, maybe Marina. But he grew up. His whole life was basically within the confines of Chinatown, and he would venture out only, to go to school.
I remember reading Bill Russell's, the famous basketball player, his biography, and he talks about growing up in Oakland and never having gone across the bridge to San Francisco during his entire life until he went to college at USF. But I can imagine, I mean, that Chinatown world probably had just everything your dad felt like he needed.
Yeah, I do know, and I don't know how I found this out. I do know that he got accepted to Berkeley.
Oh, wow.
But the war, I think it was the war. And so he ended off, he enlisted and he was off in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then,
wow.
yeah.
What amazing stories. And then what are your childhood memories of growing up and being here? What was it like for you as a kid?
Well, I think I think I've told you before, and this, that I had more of an unusual upbringing. You know, the first 5 years of my life, I
Yeah.
lived actually with a white family. I remember calling them Mama and Papa Burger, and we lived in different places in the Bay Area. You know, Fairfax, San Rafael, Redwood City. I don't have many memories. I think their daughter's name was Janie or Jean, and I think they had a German Shepherd.
Right.
And other than that, I don't remember much, except, you know, with the very few pictures my parents had of us when we were together.
Yeah.
And my parents would come and visit me maybe every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And do you remember anything about what your parents taught you when you'd see them?
No, I don't remember a thing. I
Yeah.
remember only, and it's still there to this day, 562 Union Street. I remember the address. And I remember that's where they were living then, you know, after they actually lived above the store for a few years. And then they were able to get an apartment, and it was on Union Street. And I remember, all I remember was very dark there.
Yeah. So it must have been strange to be back and living with your parents again. What was that like?
You know, I came back. They told me I came back at 5, and I must have, because I ended up going to St. Mary's School, but getting thrown out after kindergarten, and then going to Spring Valley. And so I did grammar school at Spring Valley and Chinese school at St. Mary's. And so during the day, I would go to school, day school, and then I'd end up going down to Chinatown by myself. Everyone was very independent in those days, and people really didn't worry about getting on a bus by themselves. I was 5 years old, and I would get on a bus and go to school and come back and go to Chinese school, and I was fine.
Yeah, I felt the same way growing up. I always rode the bus when in elementary school, and I don't know, it gave me a lot of confidence as a kid to feel like I could just get around the city. And I've got to say, my children are better getting around San Francisco than I ride my bike, but if I need to use public transportation, they're always teaching me.
Yeah.
So how has Chinatown changed over, like when I was a little boy, when I was in elementary, junior high, my aunt lived on California Street, just on the downhill side, like on the Chinatown side of Grace Cathedral, and we would go and visit her. And so I have kind of like vague recollections of Chinatown from that time. But how has it changed over the years? What have you noticed in terms of, you know, its development?
Well, you know, I remember when I was young, when I was, you know, it was very different. I remember there being a drugstore. They called them drugstores or pharmacies then. I remember the optometrist was on the street. I remember there were a couple of lawyers who had their office buildings there. We had the dentists, we had the pediatricians. You know, we had a community where the people who worked there served the people in the community. I even remember the shoe store down the street. I think it's still there today, maybe not in the same form, but that's where we would go to buy shoes.
Yeah, I remember my wife was a lawyer, and she worked for the Asian Law Caucus on that corner of Grant and gosh, it must
Bush.
be
I think it was
Bush.
Grant,
Yeah, Grant and
yes.
Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, but by then it was already changing. But when we came back, like 5 years ago, from having been away for 20 years, it felt really different. It almost felt like, I don't know, it felt much more oriented towards tourists.
Well, you know, I always think that the 400 to maybe the 900 blocks of Grant Avenue seem to be more oriented towards the tourists, and the rest of Chinatown still caters to the Chinese community.
Yeah, that's definitely what I feel like too. It's such a blessing to our whole city, and I wonder kind of what the future of Chinatown looks like to someone like you, has had a kind of longer term experience of it and sees the kind of trajectory that we're on.
Well, you know, for the first time, the last few days, I've been very hopeful, and just so much more upbeat. Last week, a reporter from NBC wanted to interview me. And I told her, I'm done talking about stories about how bad things are in Chinatown because of the pandemic. I said, we need to move on and we need to concentrate on what's new out there and what's happening and how people are very hopeful. There's a lot of new businesses. And so we did a great piece where we highlighted a couple of the new businesses with the younger generation. And it was just really exciting and uplifting. And it feels so great because we're getting rid of the year of the rat. Thank God that's going to be gone forever. It can't return. And the year of the ox is, maybe not so much change, but at least it's a period of respite where we can kind of calm down, absorb everything, and then start to think about how we can go forward with what we have. I know it's not going to be easy, but I think there's a lot of hope out there.
Yeah, I agree. And part of what I talk about when I talk to people about what the future holds is, I always say, going back to normal or when things are normal again. And, we'll never have what we had before. But we're on a trajectory. Things are changing, and we definitely are part of a conversation about how things will be better in some ways. But I wonder how you think things will be different when we're kind of able to be in person again. These new businesses will be underway, but how else do you think things will be different when we're not all in COVID?
Well, I think, for at least the foreseeable future, we're still going to be able to see each other in masks only. I mean, I think it's going to take a while for us to do that. I think, we will see some of these stores close along Grant. And maybe up, in other parts of Chinatown, only because we also, because there was no business for almost a year. And also some of these people are the little mom and pop stores, they're getting ready to retire.
Yeah.
And so in their place, maybe we'll have a younger generation of entrepreneurs who want to do something different. And their vision is very different from the usual, I'd say, postcard and magnet stores that we have.
Right.
And I was just on a Zoom meeting this afternoon with a very, very exciting project that we're working on now. And it's going to be a light projection show that will be projecting images on buildings. One building in particular toward the end of the month after, for the Chinese New Year festivals. So they're going to do projections onto a building and play a little music with it. And it's never been done before. And they're using Chinatown, this group is using Chinatown as their starting point. And we're their experiment. And that's kind of exciting that we're going to be the ones who are going to be leading the way to, different shows later on down the road.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I'm so excited to see that. I do think there's just artistic possibilities and possibilities with projected light that we wouldn't have explored if it hadn't been for all that happened with COVID.
Yeah, and then today, I was walking up the street and I see these artists these young kids who are, they're drawing on a parklet. There's a little parklet on Clay Street, and they were doing their art or whatever it was. Samantha and Charles. She told me to call her Sam, and they were young kids. And I said, this is such great art. It's so different. It's so fun. It's so uplifting. It's so happy. And she was so excited because she said it was her very first project. And she had not done this before. And I said, well, geez, we're going to have to make sure to let everyone know that you're out there. And so I love these young kids. And I said, you know what, try and think, because I have a new project where I'm trying to get a couple of blocks of Chinatown closed permanently to traffic. So it'll be
that's a great idea.
And I said, draw me a little sketch of what you think you would like if this street were closed. And I said, I don't want to tell you anything else other than that, because I don't want to, their creativity. I don't want to get in the way of their creativity. I said, do you see, chairs? Do you see trees? Do you see pandas? What, little lions, dragons. What do you see? I said, just draw me a little sketch. And she got so excited. And she said, don't worry, I'll come up with an idea for you. And so this is how I get a lot of my ideas for how we can change Chinatown, because I see all these kids. I mean, at some point, I was not meeting anybody older than 40 years old. They're all young kids, because those are the ones who are creative. Those are the ones who have the energy, and those are the ones who are willing to work.
Yeah, my son was talking about he said that in every generation of history, it's the younger generation that's been able to just adapt to new technologies. And I do agree with him. I wonder if you can talk about just other kind of entrepreneurs that are working in Chinatown, or other people that you've connected with who are making you excited and giving you hope for the future.
Sure. Well, I can really, this is how it started. This is my baby project. It was at least 10 years ago that I decided, I looked around and I said, Chinatown's changing. And if we don't figure out what we're going to be in the future, we're going to have some problems. So I ended up getting a little focus group of people I knew, just other merchants in the area. I took also people from nonprofits, the real estate agents, tourist guides, from all different professions, restaurateurs, and we got together and we met. And it was the first time some of these people had met each other, even though they worked side by side. Yeah. And I said, for God's sakes, say hello to each other and learn each other's names, because I think Chinese are just they're too shy about saying hello to each other. And I said, you better know who you are. And so for this first meeting, what we did was everyone just kind of vented for a couple of hours. And we had one gal there furiously writing down all the issues that we had. And there were some good ones, So I said, okay, the next time we come back, I want all of you to have gone in to a store where you didn't know the owner before, and go in and introduce yourself to that person, so you get to know your fellow neighbors.
Yes.
And there was a new guy on the block. I said, nobody's gone in to see Jamie yet. I said, everybody go in and say hello to him. So they did that. And I said, you have to come back now with solutions. I've let you bitch for 2 hours. So you're going to come back in a couple of months, and you're going to come back with what you think can be done to address all the problems you think we have. And so we met, I'd say 8 or 9 months later. Yeah. It's just a lot of thinking for them to do in the time. And so we came up with music, food, and art as a way of bringing people back into our community. And then I said, okay, the next time we come back, we will have the results. And so the last time we came, one of the biggest results, and I think it really helped create a chain reaction, was Mr. Jews. When I retired, my mom died in 2012. And I said, I said to myself, there's nobody here in our business who will follow me and succeed me. And if I don't want to just be in a very bad position and have to sell the business and be desperate. I said, I'm going to give myself a year. And I'm going to close the stores, and I'm going to find someone else to rent the spaces, because I did have, we were fortunate enough to own the real estate. And then I could find someone good to take over. Mm-hmm. And so by the end of the year, I did it. I was gone, and I had a new tenants, and I was happy. And then my dad passed away. Oh. Which was, just very heartbreaking. He was 90 years old. And I looked and I said, well, what am I going to do now? I just retired myself, in
Right.
2012, that was it.
Yeah.
And so I said, now I should start thinking about all the things we did with our meetings, our focus groups. And I said, I'm going to go out and find someone to open a restaurant. And the old Four Cs just so happened that the lease was coming up. And I called up Sarah and I said, Sarah, do you still want to keep the restaurant? She said, no, my mom just passed away too. And I just think I need a break.
Yeah.
And I said, Sarah, that's fine. Because if you had wanted to stay, you would have stayed, because I would never want to put you out of business. But, just go and be happy with your new life. And then I hung up the phone and I said, now I'm stuck. I have no plan B and I have no tenant. And so I did what everybody else would have done, right? I wrote to Michael Bauer, who didn't even know who the heck I was. Yeah. And I said, I'm trying to start this, revitalization of Chinatown. And I need somebody who's not in Chinatown already. That was one of the criteria I had. And I need him fast because I got to open a restaurant. And I never thought he'd answer me. I really was there thinking there's no plan B. Yeah. But he wrote back 3 weeks later and he said, call Brandon. And Brandon Zhu, who, I looked him up, I knew that he was a rising star chef, and that's all I knew about him. Yeah. And I called him up and I said, hey, you want to come to Chinatown? He says, well, how much space do I have? I said, I have a lot. He says, no, I don't want it. And I said, well, I'll give you cheap rent. And so he says, okay, maybe I'll look at it after all. And so when he came, we clicked. That was it. We shook hands. And that was it. And that started the adventure for both of us. Wow. Because neither of us really knew what we were getting into. I love Brandon. I mean, it's just, and when his restaurant opened and he got his Michelin star within 6 months, it made Chinatown exciting again. Yeah. And during that time, that was when I learned that I had to start meeting people and I had to start getting over my fear of speaking in public or speaking about Chinatown. I had to put myself out there. And that's what I did. And that's when I met all these young kids who would come to me and say, okay, give me a chance. Find me a place. I want to be in Chinatown. And so I did. And one of the people, the first people, it was Tiffany. I watched this girl grow up and she opened up a store and it's been absolutely beautiful. And one of the things she had was online shopping, though. She already had online presence. Oh, yeah, right. It's very important.
The young people, they start that in those food trucks too. I mean, there's like different ways to make an entry into like being a business that we're more used to.
Yeah. And so then came Kim and Ono. And now, we've got, a few other stores, Jade Chocolates. She came to me, and yeah, she had actually come to me years before. And I said, I don't have a space for you. And I guess a couple of years ago, last year, I think it was, I lose track of time, or the year before, she said, what about now? And I said, I do have a space, but there's a jerk who's in there. And I want to get rid of this jerk, but I want to give him a hard time before I get rid of him. If you can wait until I work it out with him, you can have the space. And so finally, the jerk left. And then he called me later. I gave the space to Mindy. He called me later and he says, let's have coffee so you can find out that I'm not such a big jerk after all.
That's great.
So we're great friends now. And now that he's gone and he's not my tenant. And so Mindy's moved in and she's going to have this amazing, amazing chocolate store in Chinatown. I'm so excited for her.
I was just in Chinatown within the last 6 months, and there are some just exciting new things that are happening there. It's funny. We live near Clement Street, and I don't know if you have anything to say about why Clement Street is the way Clement Street is, and why Chinatown's the way Chinatown is. I don't know if there's a story there. I never understood why they were separated.
I think it's because there probably wasn't enough room in Chinatown for all the population that was growing. Yeah. And as people, saved money and they were able to afford to move out, I think Clement was one of the little satellite Chinatowns. that was
Yeah.
created. And so, if you look along Clement Street, and I know you know it, they really catered to the local Chinatown or
Right.
Chinese population, because they're all Chinese stores, they're all right. The food, I
Yeah,
don't go down as
exactly.
often, but I think there's a lot of Asian restaurants, a lot of Asian variety stores, I guess, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All sorts of different things for tea shops and
Yeah.
hardware stores and pet shops, but that are Chinese stores. But I love both places, and I love being in both places. They're so great. We've been having a much more of a national conversation about racism in this last year. And I wonder if you can talk just little bit about just kind of your experience of racism in San Francisco and how things might be a little bit, what does it look like to you? What are you thinking about as we're going through these days?
That's interesting because, I figured you were going to ask me a little bit about that. And
Yeah.
this had to come up. And, I thought about it and I said, when I was young and living in Chinatown, I don't remember anything because it was very homogenous.
Yeah.
I went to school, and even when day school at Spring Valley, it was very much an Asian population. And then I would go down to Chinese school and it was all Chinese. And, my weekends were spent in the neighborhood with all the other kids, and nobody ever really thought about it. It only was until we moved out into the avenues that we faced racism.
Right.
My dad found a home off California Street
California.
on,
Yeah.
on 32nd Avenue. There was just a little cul-de-sac there. And he decided that he wanted to buy a house there. And he went, and this is the story I heard. There was a man there who was the contractor. He had built all the homes in that one little block. And he looked at my dad and he said, you can't buy here. I'm not selling to you, period. So my father hired a Jewish attorney who went in and made an offer on the house, and we bought it.
Yeah. That's great. Good for him.
Yeah. And then my dad decided to buy another house, and this was in the Seacliff area, and he used the same attorney. And at that time they did blind bids. And so the highest bid won, but he definitely used this man. His name is Ben Lear. I'll never forget him. He was the kindest man in the world. And he made the offer, and this was in 1965, a home in Seacliff. The highest bid was my dad's, and it was $98,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we won.
Yes.
But that's where all the racism started.
Yeah.
That's when the neighbors got together and said, we don't want you here. And my dad had actually wanted to build up a second floor. It was a one-story building. And he wanted to build the second floor because, my brother and sister and me and my grandfather. So we're going to have all of us under one roof. And we did have the air rights. And we hired at the time an attorney who was just up and coming, and nobody really knew who he was. His name was Quentin Kopp.
Oh, no way. How funny.
And so he fought for us, and we won. And to this day, Quentin and I are still very, very good friends. He calls me up and says, when are we going to lunch? In fact, we were going to have lunch until just before this lockdown came. And so we had all these beautiful people who helped us in spite of the racism.
Yeah.
And I remember my first year at Berkeley. I had an English class and I got an F.
Oh.
So I went in and I talked to the professor and I said, what the heck? You gave me an F? I know my writing isn't that bad. What is the problem? And he looked at me and he says, you know what? I'm going to give you an F plus. And I said, well, what's the plus for? Not that it's going to help my grade point average, but what's the plus for? And he said, it's because you don't have an accent.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Oh,
but in those days, He could
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
nothing.
when we were there, there was the Shantytown riots. So all the anti-apartheid protests were going on when I was on campus there, and but it's a mixed bag. Berkeley is. Do you mean everybody like there's some famous like evangelist says all these bad things about Berkeley. You know, it's and as if it's like irreligious, and we have like all these seminaries there and all these churches there. It's a mixed bag of things that, you know, I think people don't fully appreciate just how conservative and how liberal it is. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, and you know, I have to say, I have Ashley Mayu. She's a Alliance ballet dancer, and I was hosting her, and we were at the house that I used to live in, and my parents had already passed away, and I was going to renovate the house that we're living in now. And I said, Ashley, let's go over to the new house and take some measurements. It was a Sunday afternoon. And I said, and then we'll come back. So we drove over, and there was a little block party. And so we had to park outside my driveway, and we had to walk in. We walked through the party. We went into the house. We came back out. We walked back out. Not one person said hello to us.
Wow.
And so I said to her, I'm going to write an email to the neighbors with your picture, because she's African American.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say we've moved into the neighborhood. And I didn't say anything else. And from that point on, the neighbors were fine. And I had looked to Ashley and I said, this is so no one calls the police on you.
Yeah.
And she said to me, yeah, I know. And it was a sobering moment for the two of us.
Yeah.
But then again, you know, we've got this, we have friends, you know, and there's of all colors and backgrounds, and we enjoy each other, and we're, you know, there's beautiful life too out there. You know, there are these pockets, you know, that
right. And it's still so deeply ingrained in our society. But I love it when you talk about Lines Ballet. We had Alonzo King as our artist in residence, as you know. Did you see the performance at Grace Cathedral that he did? I mean, I was so moved by it. I don't know what you're probably more educated.
Absolutely, it was actually, they should have all their performances in your church. It was so incredibly beautiful and moving, and you know, the acoustics in the church.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I was near tears that day, and he picked really good music. You know, he chose really good music, and it was the dancers. Of course, you can't say anything bad about the dancers.
Oh, they're amazing.
Dancers in the world.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
It's inspirational for me. I didn't realize the dance. I mean, it touches me in such a below my conscious level. It goes all the way to my heart. I mean, it just gives me so much hope when I see what they do. Alonzo King and those dancers are just amazing.
And then they're all young and fun, and I get to see a lot of them. You know, they come over to the house,
looking into the world and excited about things and interested.
Yeah. And
one of our traditions that we have on the forum is we take questions from people in the audience. And so I'm starting to get like my little question thing is starting to give me a lot of questions. So let's start going through. So if you're watching and you'd like to submit a question, then submit a question, and Rebecca will text them to me. So here's the first question. Tongs are pillars of Chinatown's cultural identity. How do you think they view the future of the neighborhood? Do they resist the modernization you favor? That's a tough question.
Ooh, that's interesting. I don't know if anyone wants to hear this story.
I do.
How far they've come. It's kind of a gruesome story. I don't know.
I want to hear even more now.
So, but it's not like, tongs are not like that anymore. That's all I have to say. I'm prefacing this before the story. So my dad told me this not actually very, very late in life, in his life. He told me that he had an older brother who had fallen in love with a tong leader's wife. Girlfriend.
Girlfriend, yeah.
And so that was a secret relationship. And the Tong leader found out one day. So he told my uncle to stand at the corner of Clay and Grant one morning. And he's I think it was like noon. He said, stand there at noon and just wait. And so at noon he stood there, and kitty corner, the leader comes out with the girlfriend, and he makes eye contact with my uncle. And then he takes a gun out and he shoots her in the head.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow. That is a gruesome story.
It's a gruesome story. And my uncle, my dad said he never recovered. He basically, went crazy. And I think he died of an illness.
Yeah.
And, but that's the Tongs of the old day. I think today the Tongs are very, very different. I think they're an older generation now, and I think they've, more legitimate and more community oriented. And you really don't hear about any of the gang activity, so to speak, that you would have in the days of the Golden Dragon massacre. Right. You don't have that anymore in Chinatown. So
yeah, it's interesting. I was having this conversation too. I guess because of around the football game yesterday, just kind of like the difference between the way people respond when they're 27 versus 43. It is different, and when a different generation takes leadership, it changes, and things have changed in society too, And
the Tongs are, basically associations, family associations, and they've been great with the community, especially, in the pandemic. And many of them own a lot of the storefronts, and they've been so good about making sure that the rents are kept very low, so that the shopkeepers can survive. So it's a whole different, they nurture us and take care of us now.
Exactly. We're in a different world. Yeah. Here's another question. Are there concrete actions people tuning into this discussion can do to support the Chinatown community? Either one, from a social justice outreach perspective, such as helping spread information regarding vaccination or delivering meals, etc. Two, if we want to learn more about Chinatown history and culture. Or three, to support Chinatown businesses.
Oh. So I want everyone to come to Chinatown, because if you ask somebody, when's the last time you've been in Chinatown? The answer is usually, oh God, it's been years. So how would they know what's down there if they don't come now and see? And really for the, weekends now, it's car free.
Oh yeah.
So you can walk, on Grant Avenue, pedestrians only. You get to enjoy the architecture that's out there. We have people who are giving great tours. Cynthia Yee and Mark give tours of Chinatown. There's also a tour of about Bruce Lee.
Oh, wow.
And because he was born in Chinatown, the Chinese hospital.
Oh, I can't wait to tell my wife that. He's her big hero.
Yeah. And then everybody loves a good ghost story. So they have ghost tours of Chinatown. So it's fun. And then you've got all these new shops to visit. And I would say, the biggest thing you could do is really come and support the businesses and the restaurants. And for any of you out there who really wanted to get in business in Chinatown, come see me. I'll help you.
Great. That's perfect. Yeah. And I'll tell you, just as somebody who goes to Chinatown very frequently, every time we have somebody in town, well, it's easy. It's like blocks away from my office, of course. But the stores are cooler and hipper now. Do you know what I mean? The new things that are coming in just have that cool San Francisco feeling to them. I would love to have that feeling at Grace Cathedral, but I definitely appreciate it in the shops in Chinatown.
Well, we've got one of your neighbors who's right across the street from you. She lives right there on the corner of California and was it Jones?
Oh yeah.
And she's opening an art gallery as we speak in Chinatown. Oh. So we have a nice art gallery.
Yeah, a lot of cool things. So here's another question. What's happening with Chinese New Year parade this year? And could you say a little bit more about the year of the rat and the year of the ox?
Oh, aren't we so glad to be rid of the year of the rat?
I agree.
I went online just to see, because being an ABC, you got to go and figure out what all these things, an American-born Chinese, what's going on in Chinatown and Chinese New Year. But one of the things they predicted last year was that the year of the rat was going to be a rotten one. we didn't need to see that to know that. We lived it.
Yeah.
And so the year of the ox is going to be much more healing for us. They are not going to do the parade this year. They're going to do, I think, virtual, but they're going to film it on KTVU. They're going to have some sort of virtual parade. My friend Ben Fong Torres will still be emceeing.
Great.
It's going to be on February the 20th at 6 o'clock. I think there's the Flower Mart in some abbreviated form this weekend coming up. So that's where they take a couple of blocks and they sell the flowers, which are very important for the New Year's. So hopefully, people will be able to remain socially distant.
Yeah. I always think about just like what the future of Chinatown is. I mean, it's just such a gift to the city that it exists. But could you just talk about just kind of the state of gentrification in Chinatown?
I remember going through all my mom's things, and she used to love keeping newspaper articles. And all these articles would talk about in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s about how Chinatown was gentrifying. It would change things forever, and we could, nothing would ever be the same. And yet you still to this day kind of maintain the flavor. It's still there. And I think what really helps is we have the architecture.
Yes.
You can't help but feel that you are in a different world. However it's perceived, it's not, you wouldn't see like buildings like this in Asia, but you still get the feeling that you're in a different world when you enter the streets, in the gates of Chinatown.
Yeah, it's really true. You're in just a different world, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the Chinatown Muni Station, like what kind of effect that's going to have in terms of what the community's like, et cetera.
Well, hopefully, it's, I just spoke to Aaron Pesk, and he told me that it was $25 million over budget, some crazy number. We're supposed to have it open, I guess, by the end of 2022. It kind of devastated the area up there on Stockton Street. And I don't know what the problem is with the delays, but I think we're just going to have to wait and see, at that point, and, whether people will be using this transit hub, it's because it's really, from Chinatown to the Townsend Station. So I think it's maybe 3 miles long. So hopefully, I hope for all good things for it.
Yeah. If so many things are changing in so many different ways. It's hard to make short-term predictions about what things are going to be like when so much is still up in the air.
Yeah. That's the one thing about the pandemic that's done for all of us, no matter where we are. It's the uncertainty. We just don't know.
Yeah.
And people always like to know, if you can see the end, and how you're going to get there, then it makes it so much easier. But we don't know.
Yeah,
no, it's exactly a big mystery. Right. It's a big mystery.
And we usually have these big meetings to talk about how Christmas went. I just said there's no point in even having those meetings, because we're never going to have Christmas like that ever again. And just got to be as forward looking as we can. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just kind of like the morale you see in places like the YMCA and among people like my neighbor, Dr. Lee. I mean, how are people doing? Are their spirits flagging?
I think everybody. I just don't even think in just Chinatown, but I think everywhere in the city itself. I think we're all darn tired of this pandemic. And, if you think about it, some businesses have been closed for almost a year now.
Yeah.
That's tough. You don't have income for a whole year. Of course, you're going to feel lousy. Of course, you're going to feel moments of hopelessness. But I do feel that We've got this $1 trillion relief package coming.
Yeah.
We've got the vaccine on the horizon. We've got a new president. I think there's so much hope. And when we had the 1918 pandemic, we also had the Roaring 20s. And I think people are just ready to get out there and party at some point safely. And, time kind of softens the intensity of what we feel now. So as we go forward in the future, we can look back and say, oh God, it was so awful then, but it's so good now.
I love both those things because there's so many times I just think we're probably going to have Alonzo King and Lines back in Grace Cathedral. That day is going to be, we're going to have everybody back to do different kinds of celebrations, or, George Schultz's funeral will probably have, there's so many things we're going to have, but we'll be so glad to be together,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the way natural.
You said too, that just like the painfulness of it, we'll have forgotten a little bit of the painfulness of it.
Yeah. And that's so cliche to say that time heals, what is it? Time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
And, but there is some truth to that statement.
Yeah.
And everything is change. Yeah. Nothing remains stagnant or static. We always have change.
Yeah. Exactly.
Each day is a change.
Yeah, it's really true. And you either kind of fight it or you do your best to work with it,
Yes. Yeah. And I'm very hopeful. You got me on a good night, because I'm sure people are doing this, roller coaster ride during the pandemic, but I am feeling so much more hopeful for the future for all of us at this point.
Yeah, me too. And, when you say talk about Chinese New Year, I was definitely in the camp of people who thought that January of 2021 was really just like an extra month in 2020. Yes. It was just it's just more of 2020. But I do feel like this February, this moment of Chinese New Year, we are moving into something really, really different.
Yeah, and Chinese New Year actually falls on my sister's birthday.
Oh, it's perfect.
She is one of the luckiest people in the world. So I see this as a very good omen for us.
Well, if she has half the charisma you have, then that just makes her lucky, just that one thing.
Oh yeah, I think she said we're gonna have a small celebration on a Friday, and we're celebrating a major birthday of hers. So she doesn't want me saying what it is, but it's a major one, and she's happy.
Oh, that's so great. While I have you, we go walking Golden Gate Park, and they're working on all the new tennis courts there. I wonder if you could just talk about just kind of tennis, the sport of tennis in San Francisco and what it means and what your experiences have been with it, and kind of how people who are passionate about tennis are doing.
Oh, thank you. That's one of my other passions in life. I love tennis. I've been playing tennis since the 70s, and I still play, at least twice a week regularly. And I wouldn't be here were it not for Trisha
I'm grateful
who
for that.
I met because we were saving the San Francisco Tennis Club, and there's Yvonne Chan, who I had to call and find out all things Chinese New Year from. And and so we've done we're getting a new tennis club built in the same place that we had before, except it'll be subterranean. And in the meantime, we have temporary courts that have been built for us out on the Cow Palace land.
Oh yeah, right. Right. Oh, that's great.
So it's a great sport. Sports are sports. And we actually are the only indoor tennis club west of the Mississippi.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that, because that fog blows so cold.
Yes. Yeah, we've been shut down again because with no inside activity. Right. But hopefully it'll open up soon.
Are you playing tennis these days?
Yeah, I'm playing outside though.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Definitely outside.
Yeah, I hated those beginning stages of COVID when you had to like wipe down all your grocery bags from the grocery store, and you were afraid to touch the tennis ball because somebody else had touched the tennis ball.
Yeah, now I just spray everything with alcohol. I come with a bottle of alcohol and I spray everything.
We've learned.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure having you. I can't believe our time has run out, but isn't that amazing? Like how fast that
absolutely.
went. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We really, really appreciate your life and your ministry and your energy and what you bring to the city and how you support Chinatown and just your orientation to the future and your support of young people. It's so inspiring. We're so grateful to you, Betty. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for allowing me to talk about, my favorite community in the whole wide world, my Chinatown. Thank you. Please come visit us. Come see me. I'll tell you more stories.
Exactly. I'm never going to walk through there again without looking out for you out of the corner of my eye.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Oh, thank you so much. And please, everybody else, join me next week when my guest will be the documentary filmmaker Ken Burns. We'll be talking about the healing power of history, and we'll be talking about his different major documentary projects. I'm watching the Civil War right now. I recently saw his one on jazz and baseball. So bring your questions for Ken Burns for next week. You can help us bring the arts to life at Grace with a gift to the forum. You can text to Grace at 76278, or you can visit gracecathedral.org/give to Grace. And again, thanks so much, Betty Louie, for being with us tonight. And God bless you and keep you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.